Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're hyped up to be? The Terrible Book Club explores whether or not you really can judge a book by its cover or its ridiculous synopsis. If you've ever seen a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are.
Hello and welcome to episode 106 of the Terrible Book Club. I'm Chris and this is Paris.
Hello.
This time we read Feeding the Dragon, Inside the $1 Trillion Dilemma Facing Hollywood, the NBA, and American Business by Chris Fenton. This was published by Post Hill Press just this past year in 2020. We read this at the request of our patron Lynn. Thanks a bunch, Lynn. If you too would like to force us to read a book on the show, head on over to Patreon and choose the appropriate donation tier at our Patreon at patreon.com/terriblebookclub.
Thank you, Chris. If this is your first time listening to the show, what we do here at the Terrible Book Club is we read books that we assume will be bad based on their cover, title, summary, or some combination of the three. Sometimes, though, like today, we also read books that our patrons, listeners, or friends recommend. So we do the opposite of what most people do in a bookstore or while they're browsing the internet looking for a book to read. And usually this experiment results in a disappointing read, but once in a while we do end up liking the book. Content warnings for today. We're going to discuss a little bit of racism and sinophobia, so specifically racism against Chinese folks. I think that's kind of it, though. Chris, am I forgetting any content warnings we should be aware of?
Mild, perhaps alluded to drug use?
Oh, yeah.
Not really. Like, it's just
right,
our suspicion there, so that's not, like, to be clear, it could have not have been the case when we get to this scene, but it really sounds like...
All right, so there's maybe just one bump of coke in this episode.
Maybe. That's our speculation. Once again, we don't want to be defaming anyone here.
Speculation.
Just kind of sounds like maybe there's a guy in here that could have been, you know.
All right, so the summary for Feeding the Dragon is thus. As seen on Fox News' Tucker Carlson Tonight, Maria Bartiromo, Bloomberg, Salt Talks, Steve Bannon's War Room 2020, Adam Carolla Show, Useful Idiots, John Solomon Reports, Kaiser Report, CNBC, wow, this is still happening, VOA, and Fox Business. A deeply revealing memoir of big wins and hard lessons from a seasoned executive caught smack in the middle of the $1 trillion soft power struggle pitting China against Hollywood, the NBA, and American business.
Okay, so...
that list of shows just, I did not realize it
so
went
as
on.
you can perhaps see, this is a little bit more self-aggrandizing than an actual interesting, you know, look at business stuff, let's say. You perhaps might have picked this up because you were interested in seeing American and Chinese business relationships and their inner workings and the like. You're going to get just a surface level take on that at best, while the author, Chris Fenton, talks about how much he did and how much he was involved in these.
How many deals he made? Deals,
business
Chris.
deals. Stocks.
All right. Like, this is basically just the Art of the Deal 2020 China edition. Like, that's all this book is.
Yeah, if you like seeing numbers like 30 million, 50 million tossed around, 1 trillion, like, and like just kind of vaguely like estimated business deal numbers, this might be for you.
No, yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about the content in a moment. Let's talk about our characters and the setting. The setting is pretty much either California or various portions of China, usually Beijing, Shanghai, or what was the other city they were in a lot?
The Forbidden City, which I believe is within.
Oh no, not for the Forbidden City. The Chengdu. Chengdu?
Yeah, Chengdu. Might be mispronouncing that.
Yeah, I'm probably fucking this up. I'm like many Americans. I do not know how to pronounce Chinese things, unfortunately. So we're gonna do our best here without totally ruining the Chinese language, but it's hard. The main characters, Chris Fenton, the author, his friend, well, we'll talk about whether they're friendly or not right now. Dan Mintz, who is an American working in China, who is kind of the guy at DMG Entertainment, which is the firm that Fenton was Dan's agent. This is complicated because he says he's the president. There's like a whole, we'll get to this in a minute. But anyway, they work for DMG. It's a Chinese entertainment firm. I actually forget what DMG stands for.
I don't think they.
It's not really interesting or relevant, but he has his wife Jennifer, his 2 kids, all of China. It's all the same. China,
sort of
all the same
as just one big conglomerate of Chinese regulators and the people. Very generalized as a whole.
Oh yeah, it's pretty dumb. Ping pong guys, basketball guys.
There's a small ping pong anecdote that he really likes to bring up when he talks about his soft power.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess. Anyway, so there's ping pong guys, there's basketball guys for a little bit. There's
LeBron James in particular, since he was very involved in Chinese American basketball business deals. It seems like.
There's Kevin Feige, who is the guy in charge.
Nope.
What?
Kevin Feige.
What?
I can correct you for once, Paris. I can finally correct you. Feige. It is Kevin Feige.
How is that not Feige?
Listen, I've seen many an interview with this fella, and
I
my
believe
brother
you.
is an enormous Marvel fan. So
I know, I believe
I think
you.
I would know this one. Finally, I get to lord over you on how to pronounce something. Actually, it's Feige.
Okay, Kevin Feige. The guy in charge of
Do you see how it feels, Paris?
It's fine. I'd rather know the right thing to say. The guy in charge of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yeah,
correct.
That's what MCU stands for. I love how Chris's note here is, you would only not know this dude if you haven't been to a movie theater since, 2009. And I was like, I don't know this guy. I have no idea who this man is. So I have been to a movie theater since 2009, but I did not know that guy's name.
You're not really watching a ton of superhero movies here and there, so you didn't...
Yeah. JC Spinks, who is Chris Fenton's, best friend, maybe? This is the man...
Long-time pal of some kind?
This is the man who is just fueled by cocaine, even though it's not stated in the text.
Again, we're speculating here, but when you drive up to your friend's house in the middle of the night to take him to a Duran Duran concert
in your pajamas,
unexpectedly, and it seems like there might be, and when
just the way he talks to, he's always
later in the book you die suddenly.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh at a man's death, but in the arc of the text, it is...
it really seems like...
Yeah. And then Robert Downey Jr., who kind of speaks like an alien. I don't really know what's up with that.
He'd be like, come on, guys, this is China, baby. We're here to do... He talks like what you would expect a caricature of big-name actor to talk. I have seen Robert Downey Jr. do interviews and interact with people. I'm sure that's, something of a put-on persona versus what he's like in reality, but just the way the dialogue is done here seems like Chris Fenton half remembering things as what big actor man might say.
Well, he does, to Fenton's credit, he does start his book with a disclaimer that says... The views expressed in the book are mine. Though I use extensive notes and other source materials, certain creative freedoms did come into play, possibly resulting in some inaccuracies. The quoted dialogue from real people throughout the book was inspired by my recollection of each event and should not be taken as verbatim. That said, my goal was to handle the words of each character with great sensitivity and deep respect, etc., etc. Anyway, despite seeing the world through the Fenton filter, I still agree with Chris that yes, the dialogue remembered is a little
It doesn't
strange.
seem like Robert Downey to me.
Yeah. There's also like an SEC investigation, Securities and Exchange Commission, correct? Is that
yes.
SEC? Yeah. Later on, there's like a guy that plays a sort of important point.
They just call him the Fed.
Yeah. So anyway, this book is not fictional. It is supposed to be the title says it's supposed to tell you about this China dilemma faced by American business and entertainment industries, right? I mean, all it really does, though, we don't have a written summary. Chris, you want to give the summary of this book?
Okay, listen. Chris Fenton and DMG Entertainment are trying to get Iron Man 3 distributed in China, which is a little difficult considering China is a little bit protectionist about media they allow from outside that is distributed within their borders. There's, of course, lots of piracy happening in small-time markets or some such like that. But Iron Man 3 is one of the first, not the first, but one of the first bigger Hollywood productions that might be able to get released officially in China, and DMG Entertainment is sort of in the middle of this. So there's just basically a lot of anecdotes that Chris Fenton talks about, first with like other things that have to do with American-Chinese business relationships, like the ping pong anecdote we'll talk about, and some NBA stuff. I don't know why he has the NBA stuff in here when he had no dealings with it. It's just like him secondhand telling you about NBA dealings in China.
Yeah, I mean, he had something to do with those tournaments that they set up.
Sure.
But beyond that, I mean, I think he was just trying to give us examples of other times when American businesses were successful at getting an American import into China and having Chinese people like it. However, he never really explains like what the success was there. Was it just that American businesses made money and that Chinese people liked it? Like it never explained how the basketball tournaments or Iron Man 3 or anything actually improved relations between the countries. Like the ping pong stuff did, because I guess in the 60s or 70s, Chris? I can't remember.
Something like that.
I can't remember the ping pong thing. But I guess ping pong was one of the few sports in China at the time, and an American and a Chinese player got like stuck at a bus stop together, and the American was invited on the Chinese bus so he wasn't stranded, and then like he made friends and stuff, and it was a big deal because at the time China and America, were in Cold War, and it was a big deal to have Chinese and American civilians being like, hey, this guy's cool, this guy's fine, he hits a mean ping, whatever, he pings a pong. And so they had this happen, and because of that, it allowed, what was the...
I believe it was Nixon, right? Nixon
remember.
was like one of the first presidents to actually go to China
correct.
as a result of this?
Yes, as a result of the ping pong, success bromance that sprung up on that bus, we now have, I'm trying to figure out if it was Nixon. I think you're right. Or Reagan? No, it was Nixon.
I remember it being
Nixon.
Nixon. Specifically, it was Nixon.
So anyway, he explains how soft power from something non-governmental, like a sport, can improve relations between countries so that their governments are friendlier to each other. But then he doesn't really do that with his own example, which
You're
is
supposed
strange.
to take the ping pong anecdote as a thesis statement for the overarching reason as to why you would want the NBA and Hollywood to extend into the Chinese market. And I get that you're supposed to extrapolate from the business success that thus soft power was established and cultural exchange is established, but maybe you could perhaps bring more concrete examples forward of how, as a result of these, there were better communications between the entities, like as you did in the ping pong example with Nixon coming over and diplomatic relationships being opened up. If you just say, well, this happened and both sides made a lot of money, and thus you must assume that communication was bettered as a result of it, it's not as impactful.
It doesn't.
You're not proving your thesis necessarily.
Right.
You're saying that, okay, I did this thing, and then you can assume that because the ping pong thing worked out that way, this also worked out the same way.
So at the beginning, he gives a little bit of background on himself, mostly just talking about how about his experiences getting fired from his first job. That sets you up for him being fired from almost every job he's ever had, including DMG, I think, which we'll get to
at the moment. How about we start with one of his side jobs that was outside of the entertainment industry that he got while he was, working at a particular agency to start. He got a side job at noted, Italian restaurant Olive Garden, the Olive Garden. And this hit me in a special way because I am also a Chris that has worked at the Olive Garden. So, little bit of relational aspect that I can get out of here. But I gotta say, the way the Olive Garden segment, he presents this as his I know how to work business stuff, because he figures out the Olive Garden system where they actually make profits on upselling appetizers and desserts, and the entrees themselves aren't exactly what they're making the money off of. So even though people are expected to order an entree, you're then supposed to upsell them on all the other additions. But he figured out, if I don't sell them the entree and I tell them to just get appetizers to share and drinks to, pass around, my numbers would look better in the system, because the averaging takes the entree price into account. But if there's no entree there, then it's just almost pure profit margin. And therefore, I look like an amazing salesman. Look at me. As he puts it, I am an Olive Garden god. Not an exaggerated line. Literally a Dennis Reynolds style. I am an Olive Garden god. I'm a 5-star waiter.
You know what? That actually got a chuckle out of me, though. I think he was trying to be funny, and it was funny.
Yeah, it was clearly meant to be a little funny, but and I'm not sure if he literally was lifting from Dennis Reynolds there, but it sure sounds like it.
But like every good myth, our god must fall. And
it's hubris.
Yes, so he, drunk on the hubris of being the top server at Olive Garden,
he's slinging breadsticks like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah,
Paris.
he starts sneaking into the fridge or something.
Walk-in fridge.
The walk-in fridge,
where they have their prepackaged desserts. Here's some Olive Garden insider knowledge for you. The desserts are all prepackaged and bought from outside.
Yeah, dude, I think everyone hopefully everyone knows that all the food
soups
is that
come
way.
in bags too?
Yeah. So anyway, drunk on hubris, the Olive Garden god begins secretly consuming tiramisu. And eventually his manager discovers that he has consumed 273 tiramisu, and he is fired.
Okay, Paris, so here's the first instance of something to me that feels like it might be exaggerated for bragging purposes.
As he notes at the beginning, I love how he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I probably maybe some of this isn't totally accurate. And it's like, well, but you're writing a memoir.
I feel like Olive Garden because they say we've been watching you the whole time. Yeah. I feel like they would intervene at tiramisu number 172.
I would
perhaps?
say 5. I would say tiramisu number 3 or 5. Yeah. Unless they were trying to build a federal case. They're trying to because sometimes when you work security, like a retailer or something, sometimes they'll let you keep stealing so that the case value grows, so that you can be fucking arrested and prosecuted. Because if they just nip you for a couple sous, they don't have much. Like 273, done.
You go to the slammer, buddy.
Yeah. Oh, but notably, he loses his job, but he doesn't go to jail or get I don't even.
So, why let it expand to 273?
Yeah. Again,
I really feel like that was probably exaggerated. I feel like by number 50, his manager would have brought him in and been like, "Bro, listen.
Yeah.
The tiramisus were only $6 or $7, I think, when I was working there, something like that. So." By number 50, you're well past a few $100s, which I feel like is enough. And from what I remember, at least the management at my particular franchised Olive Garden, they were ready to clamp down on, because I got in there when they were just opening, and they were definitely weeding certain people out. And, after you went through Hospitaliano school.
Oh my God, I can't believe that's real.
That's real, 100%,
Jesus
$1,000,000% real.
Oh no. Oh, Chris, you're also a graduate of Hospitaliano school.
I am,
you and Chris Fenton are on the same place.
Neck and neck.
Anyway.
Except I wasn't a waiter, I was the to-go counter, so if you didn't want to stay at the Olive Garden and you just wanted to get your shit and go.
And eat in your car.
I was the one that packaged up your bagged soups and hot lamped breadsticks and $12 spaghetti plates. I remember one phone call I got. Here's my fucking Olive Garden anecdote for you. I got a call and they were placing an order and they asked me how much for a plate of spaghetti and sauce, and I was like, oh, that's $11.99. And the person on the other end of the phone was like flabbergasted.
I mean, I would be
a plate
too.
of pasta cost $12 and they like wanted me to like do something about it, and I was like, I don't know what to tell you, bro. It's $11.99 for a plate of just simple pasta and sauce.
I mean, that's a lot considering this was like 15 years ago.
I know, like I'm considering like what he was saying. The entrees don't have much profit margin. I'm like, that was $12 for.
Well, maybe they changed. I mean, because I think
there might have been meatballs in there. I forget. So maybe that was also.
Anyway, closing the Olive Garden chapter on this book. He then goes on to talk about working for an entertainment firm. I actually don't remember because he really wanted to be an agent. That was his goal. It's not
super important to know exactly what.
Yeah, I don't remember. Anyway, he talks a little bit about that, slings some weird gossip, even though at the beginning he's like, this shouldn't be gossipy, but he's like, yo, Danzig wanted to fuck bitches, though. Like, okay.
It was an LA agency that dealt with many arms of entertainment, and music was one of their bigger arms at the time. And apparently Danzig was signed under them at one point, and he decides to share a little bit of Danzig gossip. Once again, this is coming from Chris Fenton. We're not saying anything that this is a sure deal about Danzig.
I actually would say, because it's coming from Chris Fenton, for reasons we'll reveal shortly, I would relegate this to rumor and probably not accurate. But Chris, please tell us.
He claims that within Danzig's rider was a line demanding 3 women aged 20 to 25 who could talk about sports, politics, and religion, and also only lived a $20 cab ride from the show premises. Which
I mean, Danzig doesn't seem like. I'm not saying this can't be true, because Danzig does, especially after we watch Veronica, you know. Danzig does make me feel like he's maybe a little sketchy, but that's just a feeling I have.
I feel like he would maybe ask for women if possible, but like to like pare it down to such a niche that you're demanding 3 within a 5-year age range that could talk about these 3 things and also only live like 15 miles from the show, 10 miles from the show.
Also, don't you love how women are fucking yellow M&Ms? Like, yeah, just write that into the rider. Get me a dish of women. Take out the ones that don't.
Are you supposed to just phone call people at random, be like, "Hey, you want to hang out with Danzig?" Who?
Yeah, well, and the crazy thing for me is these are riders that would go to like individual venues for one night. Probably stop. So it's like the manager gets this and they're like, what the fuck? Hey, Rhonda, you want to call some of your friends? Does anyone know? Do they know about religion or sports? Politics? I don't know. I need 3 of them.
Zig is?
Mr. Dan Zig requires only the best. You know, I mean,
he's some kind of musician guy or something.
Yeah. Anyway, just a random piece of what seems like gossip. I don't know. But it was
thrown in there for I don't know.
Okay, so then this is kind of like where you notice like these chapters about his job at this agency that also handled musicians. So it becomes this thing where he starts trying to tie himself to greater people and events. He tries to say something like he was the one who told someone about Kurt Cobain's suicide, because this agency, in addition to handling Danzig, also was handling Nirvana at the time. But really what happened was just that he listened to a radio program, and that radio program was also playing in other offices, and then he mentioned it to someone, and that was it. And it's like, why are you trying to tie Kurt Cobain's suicide to you? Like, you're such a star fucker. I hate you, Chris Fenton. You suck.
It's kind of needless, especially when the point of the book is an examination of Chinese American business culture. I get that you're trying to establish, your rise in the entertainment industry.
But here's the thing. It either should be about that, or it should be a memoir, or he should find a way to weave them together more effectively. Like, is this a memoir, or is this about Chinese and American business? Because it seems like it's supposed to be about Chinese and American business, but then he has all this memoir shit. And like you said, it's not connected. So I don't know, man. You're not getting what is on the package, which is the problem for me.
A mostly irrelevant detail to up the page count, perhaps.
Yes.
I don't care that you perhaps relayed the news to Kurt Cobain's contract manager that he, allegedly might have killed himself, because it was still just being reported on the news and people were like a little unsure of it, I think.
Yeah.
Or perhaps they were. I don't know. But it's not helping your broader point. How does that even establish that you were a mover and shaker in the LA entertainment industry?
It doesn't.
You heard a radio thing and told one guy, therefore this, and you got fired from that. So it's not like you even.
Yeah, and he says he got fired and they didn't tell him why. So as the book is going on, I start becoming more and more suspicious about some of his claims and just the way he's talking about himself. Like we've said, it feels very self-aggrandizing. And I was just like, there's something weird here. So I start Googling. And if you look up Chris Fenton in this book, all you find for pages and pages is interviews with Tucker Carlson, and like he's on all these conservative radio shows, and kind of shitty pop opinion pieces that either Chris himself wrote or one of his friends wrote about his book. But if you keep going, you will eventually find an interesting piece called Debunking Hollywood Agent: Is Chris Fenton Feeding the Dragon or Feeding His Ego? By Andrew Rossow, Esquire. And I must say, Mr. Rossow, not really sure how to say that, did all the research that I was hoping to find. Like, he provided all the things that I was wondering about. And it definitely, I think my suspicions were at least partially correct based on what this article explains. I mean, it turns out that, like, Chris Fenton has actually been fired from just about every job he's ever had in Hollywood. And again, like, I know people get fired. It doesn't mean you're a bad person for getting fired from a job, but it does feel like he's kind of covering it up and also not explaining why. And sometimes he got fired for cause. So that means that you did something real bad to get fired. So it's not like you just get let go because someone doesn't like you. But he was, let me see. MBST was a prestigious management company that Fenton worked for. But he never mentions in the book, and it's because he was fired for cause. But of course he was fired for cause, locked out of their offices. And it was confirmed that he was fired due to attempted theft of client and intellectual property. But he never talks about this. He talks about getting fired for tiramisu eating, but not for stealing. So, not for like actual adult theft, not just eating a tiramisu. And there's a bunch of other, this article points out a bunch of other things that I was also curious about. So he calls himself president of DMG for 17 years. And yet it seems like he's really just Dan's agent. And, it is interesting because Mr. Rossow discovered that he only was actually an employee of DMG for 5 years. So he must have just been Dan's agent before that, but that doesn't mean he was an employee of DMG. He was employed by Dan. And he asked DMG, like, why was he given this title as president if he wasn't president? And the employee said that Mr. Fenton requested a title like that because it might help him open more doors for the company. So he was like, say I'm your president and I will use all my fancy connections, essentially, is what I'm kind of speculating here. So, I mean, there's a lot. I'm not going to read the whole article and point out all of the things that are either lies or exaggerations, but this article makes a compelling case that Fenton's just kind of a bullshitter and has just gotten by, I think because in the entertainment industry, things move pretty quickly. And also a lot of people in the entertainment industry are kind of shitbags anyway. So, it's not like It's not like he's not at home in that profession if he's
Sure.
going to lie about stuff all the time. But I do think it's unfortunate, right? Because, like I said, getting fired from a job doesn't mean you're a bad person. Making mistakes, it doesn't mean you're fucked forever. Like, okay, maybe he stole some intellectual property or client property. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's like an office chair or like files, but he could have just talked about all of this and explained it. He could have just said, hey, I don't know. I was on a coke bender and whatever. Or, I don't know. He could
JC
have
got to me that night and we thought we'd start our own agency.
Yeah.
So I stole all the client info and decided to call him up and say, hey, come on over to Fenton's 5 Forces agency or
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's only survived by being close to the people who actually make the deals, like Dan Mintz and others.
That's my central problem with this entire book, actually.
Yeah, he's not actually the one solely responsible for this. He might be on a team, but he's working for Dan, and Dan and other people are making these deals, and Chris is helping. Certainly.
He's certainly lubricating
involved.
Things, especially on the American side of things. So,
but
Paris, actually, I'll let you make your point.
Sorry, I was just going to say, but to try to say that you're the one, the way he writes it, it seems like he's responsible for all this stuff. He calls himself a China expert on like his LinkedIn and Twitter and in other places, and other people, of course, have parroted this. I think another part of the reason that Chris Fenton has kind of been able to pull the wool over everyone's eyes here is not only because he's near people, therefore kind of, part of these deals, but not orchestrating them, is that his work is with China. And a lot of people just don't know shit about China. Like, it's true that a lot of people in America are ignorant about, I would say, greater Asia, not even just China itself. And China, as Chris pointed out, is pretty protectionist about everything. They're definitely ones to, spin things to their favor, keep data concealed and things like that. I mean, not that every other country doesn't do that too, the U.S.
not
included.
Unique to China.
But not trying to demonize China here, just trying to explain that, like, I think maybe some of Fenton's purported success here is because he's claiming to be a specialist in something that very few people understand, or are involved in. And I guess the people who are involved in it don't care enough to be like, oh yeah, that guy's not really involved. No one really gives a shit. And again, this isn't, I want to say I'm getting all of this data from this, this article by Mr. Rossow, and I have no reason not to believe it. Why would this random reporter have anything to prove against Chris Fenton, right? But it seemed like he did a pretty good dressing down of this book. Yeah, so if you're interested in all those details, I'll leave you to that article. Anyway.
So I think I can move on over to, again, my central problem with this entire book here, which is coming off of some of the stuff that you were talking about there.
Yeah.
Chris Fenton wants to write a book that is sort of centrally themed, or tries to be centrally themed, around American and Chinese business dealings. And if you're someone that has an interest in something like that, like Paris said, it's hard to get a lot of good detail on that. And this could be a treasure trove of information on how those dealings work. Fenton does bring up the fact that a lot of Chinese business relationships are poised around your relationship with particular government entities or regulators. The word that he uses is spelled Guanxi. I probably can't pronounce it correctly, but I think it's Guanxi or something along those lines.
Yeah, sure.
Sort of like your interconnection to a government body that helps you get things moved along more. And
it's not only just government, it's just your relationships, like having good relationships with other people.
Sure. And he kind of puts it as if this is a China-specific thing, when, like, in reality, that's just as important in America or most other countries as, like, business connections, right? Like,
your relationships with other people are important no matter what fucking country you're in.
Specific relationships that you build upon are what help you get ahead. And I'm not saying that that's wrong or irrelevant here. And Chris Fenton sure does a lot to build certain relationships and lubricate certain deals, but we never get specific details. He talks about how these specific regulations under the CCP about how many foreign films are allowed in and what kind of content is supposed to be allowed. They're usually pro-China stuff is what gets through more than anything else. And a lot of the Iron Man 3 dealings here are about introducing Chinese actors, scenes shot in China with Chinese crew. And yeah, that's part of this as well, but it doesn't seem to me like Chris was the one that necessarily negotiated these dealings with the Chinese entities.
Correct, he was
He
not.
is more so the one going to the American entities and saying, this is what the Chinese regulators or entities want, and trying to essentially, I don't want to say the word shill all the way, though, although he does bring that up. He's like, I feel like I'm a shill for the Chinese Communist Party. Which, yeah, you kind of are, in a way, if you're the one lobbying American executives to, let's put in this Chinese character or these Chinese scenes into this movie. That's what you're doing. And
Yeah, you're a Chinese lobbyist.
that's not necessarily a terrible thing. Like,
No.
It's just like, sure, but I am way more interested in those conversations with the Chinese entities. You can get a lot more information about American business dealings and what they want. Of course, they, don't necessarily want to shove in all the Chinese stuff all the time, because that might put off other people, perhaps American people, into...
Well, it's all about making it coherent, right? Like, that's the biggest problem, is like, you're just trying to shove Chinese stuff into a movie that maybe never had anything to do with China. And that's really the biggest problem that Chris faces when he's talking to folks at Disney, Marvel.
It seems more often than not that Dan or some other DMG executive is the one going to the Chinese entities and getting from them, what exactly would you want in this to make it distributable in China? I am far more interested in that conversation. I understand that you're getting that data from Dan and like that's the piece that we're supposed to come with, but obviously it wasn't just a, easy negotiation. There was some table dealings with Dan and the Chinese entities about exactly what can we get away with here? What are you guys willing to do? I'm far more interested in that than Chris getting that detail from Dan and running over to Marvel and saying, can we please introduce Dr. Wu into Iron Man 3?
Yeah, I agree with you. He even states multiple times in the book, I'm not in the room with China. I don't even know who makes those deals. I don't know how those deals are made. So it's very strange to me that he writes the book as though he is, but then slips in these little pieces that are like, oh yeah, no, I don't deal directly with China. I can only imagine what things that they would find offensive. Like, I'm not totally sure. Because at one point he guesses, like, yeah, they're probably not going to want a Chinese actor as a villain, of course. I think that's something anyone could guess. But he says, although those negotiations are closed to him. So yeah, I agree with you. It's very, it doesn't actually reveal anything about how this stuff works. Although I guess all you could possibly learn, is that, hey, if you want to show a movie in China, you have to put pro-China elements in it and maybe achieve co-production status where you're actually shooting in China using Chinese crew, and cooperating with what they want. I mean, and I, by the way, I am a person who knew nothing about this. I don't know anything about the Chinese film industry or getting films in America shown in China. I don't know anything about movie agents or basketball or ping pong. I don't know. I don't really know a lot about China, to be fair. So I am a person who would pick this up blind and be like, oh, I'm going to learn something. And I don't feel like I really learned anything other than I didn't know about the ping pong thing. And I mean, it was good, an important piece of US and China relations to know about. I didn't really know that basketball was super big in China. I knew that they had basketball, but again, I'm someone who doesn't know anything about this. But from what Chris Fenton is trying to tell me, trying to teach me as a person picking up this book who knows nothing about these topics, I don't feel like I learned anything. I wouldn't know who to go to or what arguments to make,
Or at least they're not in-depth details.
Yeah.
I feel like this is something you could get from any puff piece about American-Chinese relationships, or perhaps even a Wikipedia article about American-Chinese business dealings. If I'm picking up a book like this, I really want some of that insider knowledge about talks and negotiations with Chinese entities.
Yeah.
Because that is the true opaque thing that I'm trying to pierce the veil of if I'm interested in something like this.
Yeah. And I mean, because why would I be interested in, I don't know, I guess some people might be interested in a memoir about some random Hollywood executive, but it's not something that I would be interested in by. But even if I was, sorry, I think I forgot to make this point at the end of my last spiel about all the things that seem to be lies or exaggerations or omissions on Fenton's part. I would, if you want to write a compelling memoir, you want to talk about that negative stuff. You want to own up to it. Owning up to, again, I want to point out that owning up to your tiramisus in college and, getting fired for cause because you maybe stole something and ruined relationships. Where's all that guanxi you spoke about in America when you're burning bridges seemingly, at every agency you work for? It's just annoying that this book doesn't actually get anything. I don't really get a good memoir. I don't get details on American-Chinese film negotiation. I just get this watered down, like you said, sort of a prolonged puff piece that sort of anyone could have written. And it's just unfortunate that Fenton didn't want to talk about the more difficult parts of his career. And it's, and if he had, then maybe other people wouldn't have had to dig through his life and get all these interviews and compile all these documents to say, to show that he omitted a lot of things and maybe made some stuff up, which doesn't make you look good, Just own up to that stuff.
He certainly included every article positively written about his dealings in China, almost like paragraphs of full quotes from articles about how DMG is really opening up cultural trade.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the few things he did in America to make the co-China production look good was he had some friends who were reporters or journalists or had sway at, magazines or some kind of publishers, and convinced them to write articles or to use something he wrote and kind of reworded in their voice and have them published. And yeah, every time he brings up these articles that are positive about him or DMG, he puts so much of the article in the book. It's like, dude, you could have just pulled a quote or just said there was a positive article and then put a footnote to the link. I don't need to read 3 paragraphs of an article about how cool you are in a book that you're already writing about how cool you are. It's a little weird. Pulling a positive quote is fine, but these big blocks of text from articles is a weird choice. I mean, that's more of a technical choice, but
there's at least one instance of an article that sort of pans them for sure for getting involved in Chinese business dealings. So it's not all positive, but there's just very minimal on the other side.
Yeah. There's kind of a lot to go over here. The other thing I want to point out is that, again, Fenton markets himself as an expert on China, and he is on. He's part of the, what is it? American Asian something Institute. It's some body of lawmakers and lay people who are trying to work together to better relations between the US and Asian countries, predominantly China. And he not works there, but it's his hobby thing or whatever. Yeah, and so he really pushes this whole I'm an expert on China. He doesn't speak Chinese. Which to me is if you're going to be an expert on a country, I feel you need to speak the language. Maybe that's wrong of me, but how can you possibly understand a culture if you don't understand the language? How can you be an expert and move fluidly in that country if you don't speak the language? To me, that was another tell that made me concerned that what he was saying was...
His partner Dan can certainly do that.
Yeah, Dan spoke Chinese. And so did many people he worked with, of course, because DMG is a Chinese firm. But there was also evidence from this Rossow article that apparently Fenton was only in China a handful of times. So it seems to me like he maybe was only in China the few times he writes about in the book. And then maybe for the, I don't even know if he was ever there for the basketball tournament thing. I think maybe he was. But how can you be an expert if you don't speak the language, if you can't read the language, if you don't understand it, and if you've only been to a place, you know, a few times for short stays? I think that is that's a pretty compelling point that he's not an expert. I mean, unless my evaluation of what an expert is totally off. But to me, if you're supposed to be an expert on a certain country's culture, you would think that you would have to be a part of that culture, or at least try to be. It's, again, very strange to me that this guy...
I mean, there's a point where he lists a bunch of phrases that he thinks the Chinese regulators might have a problem with in the script of Iron Man, and he's straight up like, I don't know, maybe they'd have a problem with these. If you're the cultural expert, shouldn't you be the one with that answer?
Yeah, and I guess, you know, you might wonder, like, well, why is it a problem if this guy is saying he's an expert, but maybe he's not? It's like, well, because U.S.-China relations are tense pretty much all the time, and having someone who claims to know what they're doing, but not really, is a problem. I mean, that could create a serious issue if he was, like, part of some envoy to China and, like, fucked everything up, you know, or is giving bad advice to people in America on how to handle Chinese business negotiations. Yeah, it's just... It's troubling. It's troubling in a lot of ways.
There's a part... Can we briefly move over into the SEC investigation segment of the book? Because there's a part in that which I think is extremely patronizing towards one of the people in the scene.
Oh, so, yeah. Go ahead.
Essentially, DMG gets embroiled in an SEC investigation because there's suspicions, perhaps, of the reason DMG is able to get these high-caliber business deals moving is that they are specifically bribing Chinese officials to get their movies distributed ahead of other things, and that's a big ol' no-no.
Mm-hmm.
So Chris paints it as like, I had no idea this was happening. I'm pretty sure our company never did anything. And so his big idea is to go to the federal investigator that is in charge of this case to give him some kind of PowerPoint presentation on how Chinese business dealing works, to give this federal investigator a better idea of what the picture on the ground is like.
Yeah, because he thinks the investigator doesn't understand how Chinese business works.
If this investigator is tasked with observing and investigating foreign business dealings, especially in China, perhaps he was picked because he has some working knowledge of business dealings in China. I can understand taking a meeting and taking the temperature of what he knows.
Right.
But Chris Fenton comes out there starting from the basics as if this guy wouldn't know anything about it, which is an extremely patronizing view on that, especially when assumingly this person has been working in foreign business affairs, perhaps longer, maybe not longer than Chris Fenton has, but certainly with a broader depth of knowledge than Chris Fenton seems to have.
Yeah, I agree. That's pretty troubling to march into the SEC office and be like, but you don't understand. And the investigator being like, I don't see how this is helpful.
He even says that, like, during the meeting, the guy seems mostly bored.
Yeah, and then Fenton did a bunch of, like, research on the guy to figure out he has kids and, like, where he went to school and where he lives. So there's a fire alarm going off, so they have to leave during this meeting. And Fenton's like, so how's your kids? How's your house? What's going on? And the guy's like, okay, I can see you did your homework on me, but, like, we really shouldn't talk like this. But then he starts talking about, was it the financial crash or something? And how big banks shouldn't have been bailed out and stuff. Yeah. And they, like, make friendly over that. And then he's like, oh, and then no one got prosecuted, or, like, no one was found guilty. So it's almost like he's saying because he had that nice talk with this investigator that it, like, fixed the investigation. He doesn't say that directly, but why would you include this P? Like, he could have just said, oh man, I'm getting fucking investigated by the SEC. I don't think my company's doing anything, but this is a serious thing. I had a meeting with the guy. It all turned out okay. Fine. But yeah, to be clear, the SEC did not eventually find any fault. with DMG or any of Fenton's, I guess,
Yeah,
people
we're
he
not
worked with.
here saying that DMG was embroiled in anything.
No.
It's just that this is an extremely dumb fuck way to go about.
Yeah.
Like, even when your lawyers are like, hey, Chris, that's probably not a great idea.
Yeah. There are just so many things that I had trouble with. So again, if you're supposed to be an expert in this country, shouldn't you know when you say something that sounds a little culturally insensitive? And there were just many points in the book where I don't think, I truly don't think Fenton was trying to say anything offensive or racist, but there were things said in the book that came off that way. And that if he was really some kind of cultural ambassador to China, he would have known better how to censor what he was writing to not be offensive to China. For example, there's a passage towards the beginning about how Chinese people can only handle simple sports. Jesus fucking Christ. Like, just change the wording there to something like, when surveyed, it was discovered that Chinese audiences enjoy sports with fewer rules, rather than phrasing it in a way that makes them seem stupid when Chinese people are not stupid. And that's also a recurring racist stereotype about people not American. Like, why would you perpetuate that? And to be clear, the passage in the book is actually worse than what I'm even saying. It's like he and Dan saying how, oh yeah, they like the real simple stuff, that they can't handle anything more. It's like, come on, guys. And even if he is reproducing a conversation, he could do it in a more sensitive way, is my point.
If you're already taking liberties with the dialogue you're reproducing.
Right. And then there's a part where he says the suicide rate under Mao was so high that it was unsafe to walk outside because you'd be hit by a falling body. And I was like, that just smacks of like urban legend flavoring. I mean, yes, many people suffered under the reign of Mao in China. We know this. And I'm sure the suicide rates were high. But again,
maybe even someone got hit by a falling body somewhere
once,
out there.
Yeah, I don't know. But to
act like every Chinese person was like, can't go outside, I'm gonna get hit by someone falling off the roof of another building.
Yeah, like let the bodies hit the floor was inspired by like come on.
It's smacks of the same thing as when I live in a certain subsection of Boston that like sometimes when I tell people like, yeah, oh yeah, I live here, they'd be like, aren't you scared? I'm like, no.
Oh, are you near the brown people and the black people, Chris?
Yeah, like, no, it's fine.
All the purse clutchers.
Yeah, like, I walk to and from the convenience store all the time, or to the train, and sure, there might have been a couple of armed robberies on the way to the train, not towards me, but like, but it was like a handful over many, many, many years.
That's also just like, being in a city.
Yeah, that's just being in a city. Like, you know, or it's not like it's every single time I go outside, I have to like be dodging bandits and like fooling them with caltrops and smoke bombs.
Yes. Yeah. So there's just this unfortunate flavor of sort of racial stereotyping that happens in this book.
There's also a particular phrase that really rubs me.
Oh yeah, you want to talk about your favorite phrase and my note to help you out there?
So at some point, like about page 175 or so in the book, Chris and some other people start tossing around this phrase. So a lot of the business dealings in this book are on Iron Man 3. So they start talking about Marvel and Mao getting together, and they keep repeating this phrase, Marvel and Mao. Oh yeah, we're getting Marvel and Mao together. And like, I get it. Oh, your cutesy alliteration about American business and China government as a whole, but like, it just don't hit right, guys. Especially when Mao is long gone. I understand that the legacy of Mao's policies is still a major part of the Chinese Communist Party, but just it doesn't feel great to put it that way when a lot of things have also changed since Mao.
Yeah, and I think the best way you put it was it's just another lowbrow generalization of culture in China. And yeah, I mean, plus the best part about this phrase is that in the latter part of the book, he's like, oh yeah, we're getting Marvel and Mal. Like he's on the phone with other people. And they're like, oh, Marvel and Mal, that's such a good phrase. He's like, yeah, I thought it up. It's pretty good, right? But even though JC Spinks, his friend, is the one who came up with the phrase at dinner, and that part is in the book. So, like, he'll tell you one thing and then contradict himself. And so what I know it's just a silly thing about a phrase, but it's fucked up to take credit for something that your friend did. Like, you know, because JC and him are at dinner, and he's like, oh, yeah, it's like you're getting Marvel and Mao together. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's a good phrase. And it's fine if you want to say the phrase your friend used, but be like, oh yeah, my friend JC came up with that. It's that simple. You don't have to fucking absorb credit like some monster sponge everywhere you go. Jesus.
That's also like the one JC Spinks appearance that was kind of reasonable to include.
Yes.
We mentioned the Duran Duran thing. That was its own chapter set aside from everything else where JC just brings them out on this adventure where he's like, oh, look at my Hollywood LA lifestyle where I'm going out to front row Duran Duran concerts in my pajamas, and the lead singer Duran Duran saw us in the front row in our pajamas, and wasn't this so cool? Why is this necessary to include?
Again, because he doesn't know if he's writing a selective memoir about how cool he is, or if he's writing about American-China business dealings. He's kind of trying to do a little of both, and it's not working.
It's really not melding the way you want it to, dude.
No.
Like, again, I understand, like, you want to bring JC in here. He's your cool friend that passed on. You want to honor him somewhat. Maybe leave it at the dinner conversation about where he came up with that phrase that you like to say so much.
And he could have just said, hey, we had this crazy night where maybe it could have been a paragraph or two where he was like, yeah,
like that
concert,
one time that
wacky JC. Anyway,
as its own entire chapter. Needless.
I know. God, there's a lot about this I don't love. There are some things though that I do. We're kind of doing this backwards, where I'm now going to talk about the things that I actually agree with Fenton on, and basically that, yeah, soft power is super useful between nations or between states or, you know, any kind of opposing force. Anything that's not directly kind of governmental or related to negotiations about something you disagree with, you know, any soft power thing, whether it's music or arts or movies, or sports, you know, I think it's all a good thing to pursue and to be and you know, if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into diplomatic relations, of course it's important, and that's fine. I also agree with him that Americans are kind of overly afraid of China in a lot of ways, like doing business in China and things like that. You know, I kind of agree with that. I mean, I'm not, you know, of course, I'm no expert on the matter, but frankly, neither is Fenton. So I don't know. I think I deserve to say how I feel about China and American business associations too. But, you know, joking aside, I think that there is this fear steeped in racism, frankly, that doesn't exist for a lot of other places that people kind of consider more white or Western, and people. Yeah, I just think there's a lot of excess fear about China. I'm not saying China's like totally harmless and cool. Like, don't take me as saying that, but I agree with Fenton that it is a delicate dance here. You know, you do have to be careful how you handle these sorts of deals. I'm trying to think of anything else. Oh, the other thing we agreed with him on, Chris, both of us, was the whole how he was mad that banks got bailed out in the 2008 financial crash, but you might want to talk a little bit about how that is maybe not even...
This even comes back to the whole Chinese-American business things where he's trying to talk up soft power and the cultural diplomacy here. I don't fully take him at his word that he's doing this to prolong or, you know, continue these relationships out of, you know, I think it's a great thing to do. Because every time he brings up increasing soft power dealings with China, it always has a following line of like, and then we're also going to make a fuckload of money too.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the Lehman Brothers thing, because specifically he always talks about the Lehman Brothers bailout when they collapsed, because he had a portfolio of investments with Lehman Brothers, and his portfolio zeroed the hell out. He lost it all in that.
He lost all of his retirement and savings, to be clear. He didn't lose his whole life, which is kind of how he makes it seem, but anyway.
But it's always couched in, and I was affected by this monetarily, and therefore that is why I care about this more than anything. I do agree that there should have been consequences for these poor investment schemes and the interweaving of them to such a degree that it brought the financial system to the brink of collapse, which we still haven't done a lot of work on fixing. So, but like, it's always behind this veil of because money, and it affected me monetarily. So I always don't think you have the pure best interests at heart about it all the time. When I think most of the reason you're bringing up the bailout stuff is, once again, because you were personally affected by it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think he also says something else I agreed with him on was just that climate change. Yeah, climate change, that we try to blame China for climate change when, like, in reality, the Western world, especially the U.S., carries a significant burden as well.
We've been at it longer than China has.
Yeah, and we also pushed a lot of that manufacturing in China to happen to benefit people in the U.S. So, but of course, he never goes into great detail about these nuances. I realized I forgot something kind of important about the whole cultural insensitivity piece. Towards the beginning, he's talking about how there was this failed marketing campaign that LeBron James tried to do in China. There were ads that LeBron James or his marketing agency or whatever ran, or the NBA, ran in China using dragons. And China said that, and they were loath that their prized mythological animal would be used in this advertisement. And they, SARFed, one of the Chinese agencies that kind of handle stuff like this, said the ads were an insult to the country's national dignity. Yet, Chris Fenton's book has this kind of awful looking dragon cover and is called Feeding the Dragon and has a bunch of yin-yangs in it. And it's like,
yeah, yin-yangs is a little paragraph or chapter breakers kind of thing. Like,
Chris Fenton, why can you use the dragon as you wish? Why is that not insensitive when China has clearly said that they find it insulting when Westerners utilize this mythological animal that's important to them? And again, the cover of this book is a Chinese-style dragon. I just think it's a weird thing to write that in your book and then have that on your cover. It's a little strange.
These moments of lack of self-reflection on things.
Yeah, there was this other part where he said that wearing a smog mask was incredibly insulting to China while you were there. And it was kind of hard for me to either verify or find that statement to be false. Just because if you type China mask right now, I mean, obviously we're still pandemicking, so it's kind of difficult to figure out what things were like before then. And unfortunately, I don't know anyone in China. So, but it seemed a little weird to me because China and many other Asian countries have kind of normalized mask wearing because of like the H1N1 flu and things like smog. So it's weird to me that it would be offensive for a foreigner to wear a smog mask when they were in China. I don't know. Maybe he's right, but that was just another thing that kind of smacked as a little odd. And that's the way that he talks about.
What about the whole crowd management thing?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's a whole other piece. But I guess if you want to talk about that after I just say my piece about, China in this book is just the landmass of China and all of its Chinese people who are all the same. When in reality, China's a diverse place. It's got big cities. It's got technology. It's also got farms. It's got, it's got Uyghurs. It's got all sorts of people of different descents. And
he does point that out when he talks about this crowd control thing. So there's sort of the opening scene in the book that we get Tarantino to at the end of it as well is the premiere of Iron Man 3, where Robert Downey Jr. is making a red carpet appearance for the premiere in China. It's a big deal because the first time like a huge Hollywood star has been here, and he keeps bringing up this thing as like, oh, the Chinese don't do it the same way as in America. They're used to a different thing. So he's putting it as if China has never managed a large-scale event where they have to do security for celebrities. There's Chinese superstars I'm sure they've had to do that for.
Thank you for saying saying that.
It's not any different because it's an American coming through here. It would be the same safety concerns. By the way, what they end up doing is that they have, like, Dan has some connection where he can,
so
like, say, you know, he's like, oh, go out into the rural country and round up literally thousands of rural farm workers and get them a bunch of suits and have them act as security here because they're taller in general or perhaps more intimidating, and get this done in like 3 hours. Which, okay, that probably is maybe a thing you could do in China. I'm not denying that or anything. But at the same time, just the fact that it seems like you guys mismanaged this red carpet thing. Like, you were the guys that were expected to bring, traditional Chinese security onto it. I don't really think that for every Chinese movie premiere where there's maybe a star walking down the red carpet that they always round up a bunch of rural workers to act as security. There was definitely even talk about regular Chinese security people that were there that were like picking farmers out from the ones that were rounded up to work for them later. So there are Chinese security firms doing this. It just seems like you guys didn't call them up enough, and maybe you wanted some cheap labor on the side to do this for you too.
Yeah,
I cannot believe that it's just because China doesn't do things like Hollywood that you couldn't have gotten proper event security.
I agree, too, that I really don't like his characterization. Again, that, like, China, everything is the same. And also, China doesn't know how to do Hollywood. Like you said, I mean, China has its own celebrities. It's not like they've never had...
industry.
Yeah, like, it's not like they've never had celebrities before. It's so... And whatever happened to all the times, like, LeBron was there and stuff? Where was the security then? Who hired them? Who were they? Were they farmers again?
I'm assuming you're supposed to take that Robert Downey is somehow a larger celebrity than Robert Downey is, especially because this is like a first-time American actor making an appearance in China kind of thing. And I can understand, yeah, that maybe is a bigger deal, but
sure.
Assumedly some Chinese big-name actor before has had to deal with crowds attempting to get at him.
Yeah.
It just, again, smacks of generalizing everything as different from the U.S. in almost all ways, and we're going to have to handle it differently here from...
Well, it just seems like... It seems like everything he says is China is lesser than. Even though he tries to kind of, fancy that up by saying, oh, no, yeah, China, very modern, blah, blah. But still, the subtext of what he's saying is kind of like, China doesn't really know how to do this the right that's how it comes off as you read it. So I don't really know what else to say about this other than, like, I do wonder how true a lot of the things he says are. Oh, and so the last major thing that Chris Fenton forgot to mention was that he is suing DMG and DMG is countersuing him, and all of that shit started in 2019, and this book came out, it was done being written in 2020. And it's just like, so, and Dan Mintz is named in the suit. So Chris Fenton, like, is suing DMG, and then DMG is countersuing him, but somehow that's not in this book about Chris Fenton and DMG, which seems to me to be a pretty glaring omission.
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, legally his lawyers were like, don't say shit about that. But if you're talking about your dealings with DMG, his lawyers were probably like, don't say shit about that either.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe it is like hey, this is an ongoing... But he could have just said, P.S., there's an ongoing legal suit. But then this begs the question, why write this book about how successful he was when working with DMG if he's going to sue DMG? Oh, is it because maybe he's trying to make himself look better for the upcoming lawsuit that he was planning?
You can't see me rubbing my beard extremely fast. I'll do it into the microphone for ASMR here.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just want to close with saying, should you read this? I would say no. I would say that there are probably other books out there by experts who know more shit about China and Japan.
In the Can We Fix It section here, I wrote, I would much rather read Dan Mintz's version of this.
Yeah, because you're right. It does seem like Dan was the one actually dealing with China because Dan lived in China. Yeah, I mean, for me, this could really only be fixed if it was a true memoir or a true assessment of American-Chinese business dealings and not an attempt by the author to just make himself look better. He doesn't really ever acknowledge anything that he could have done wrong or could have done better or like critiques about him. Again, I'm not counting the Olive Garden because that was like a fucking job you had in college. He doesn't talk about all of the time, like the many times he was let go, the accusations of fraud against him and theft. I mean, again, maybe you're right. Maybe it's because of the pending lawsuit that he can't talk about it. But this whole book just rings very hollow as a result.
Maybe wait till all the legal stuff is done to write about it. Perhaps. He never really discusses anything in a nuanced way and barely touches the surface of any subject. It just would have been so much more compelling if it wasn't this glossy, dimensionless jerk-off session about the author. I would say it's misguided and accidentally insensitive at best, and a shameless self-aggrandizement with an unbalanced, racist Western perspective at worst. At worst, sorry. I can't quite place where on that spectrum this lands. I want to lean towards the former. Honestly, Fenton just seems like a guy who wants to make money and doesn't think too hard about things. I don't get the sense that he intended any harm with this book or with what he was doing for work, but like, intent doesn't totally excuse impact. Especially when intent and impact between America and Chinese relations is a major theme in your fucking book. I mean, he seems to buy into his own idea of like soft power being important, but like Chris said, it really seems like he only cares about it because it's tied to his bank account. It's a rationalization to make himself feel better about how he makes his fortunes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's strange that he has all these interviews and features on conservative pieces. I find that especially odd. And I actually watched one of them when he was on Tucker Carlson. And Carlson starts off the interview maligning China and maligning people like Chris Fenton right before he interviews Chris Fenton. And then Tucker Carlson like praises the book, which makes me feel like no one actually read this book. Chris Fenton looks very uncomfortable the whole time. He kind of says he was wrong to partner with China, but then says it's good. The whole interview with Tucker Carlson and Chris Fenton is just weird. And it clearly seems like he's saying, yes, I'm a conservative, but please don't kill this industry that has made me rich. It can make America rich. You know, it's sort of that stuff. And I don't know. I don't want to say that Chris Fenton is objectively a bad person or anything, but all of this book and what I know of him does not make me like him. And he's not a fictional character. He's a real person. Yeah. You know, like involved in potentially important dealings outside of Hollywood. So it does make me feel like, oh, that's a little concerning.
He talks about how he talked with Adam Schiff at one point to help a business dealing along. So he's like up in Washington too with that particular group that you talked about before that kind of deals with East Asian interests.
Yeah, sorry, I can't remember the name of it. Sorry, I'm just gonna grab it because it is important to note that the U.S. Asia Institute, so the USAI. Oh yeah, fun fact. He is 3 degrees away from me on LinkedIn, so that's weird. I went to just see what his LinkedIn said about his employment because that article that we read claimed that he lied about it. And yeah, I mean, he has all the same kind of exaggerations, perhaps, or maybe it's not a lie that his title was president of DMG, but the story behind that,
than like a brand for him to put on his business card.
Yeah, so I would say the exaggerations are concerning. The omission of anything that really made him feel like a person made the book bad. You know, there's just so many things that I really didn't like about this book. I
don't think it's a very useful book for anyone, especially if you're looking for some kind of insider knowledge on American Chinese business dealings. The best I can say about it is that, yes, I also think that soft power cultural exchange is an important part of, you know, getting a more interconnected world that probably isn't going to go to war with each other more often.
And I guess I hope that Fenton maybe gets more. I hope that he gets more actual experience in China and maybe learns Chinese and goes then spends more time there and gets more involved in US Asia Institute stuff. I mean, he started this game. Why not finish it out well, you know? I hope that he doesn't keep doing this whole like kind of shtick where he works for entertainment companies and like pretends he's an expert in China when the evidence certainly doesn't convince me that he is an expert in China. I will say, as a late,
if he's an expert in China, then I'm an expert in Japan because I've watched some animes before.
Well, I don't know that's a
I'm being
good
very,
analogy, but
yeah.
but like, I think that it's I think he pushes that definition for sure. Anyhow, I don't know if I have anything else to say other than I guess Lynn, thanks for recommending this book. It was definitely something I would never pick up.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't even know if we would have chosen this for Terrible Book Club if we didn't know.
I'm sorry you read it.
Yeah, sorry. Oh my God, we didn't talk about the Rolodex.
Oh yeah.
I was just thinking about Lynn and their message to us, and I was like, oh yeah, the Rolodex thing. Yeah, his whole like, relationship building. His whole key to everything is just write people's names and details about them on a Rolodex. But like, bro, we got social media. You don't need to remember shit about people. You can just be like, oh yeah, they have 5 kids. Their birthday's in January. They live in LA.
You know, they liked posts about coffee and tennis or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, sure, you can write things down about people if you want, but like, I don't think that really did anything. I don't know.
It might be, we're getting older too, Paris. I'm sure you've felt the memory slippage here and there too. It's important to write things down sometimes.
It is.
But like you said, social media really just makes that whole giant Rolodex that you have a little bit obsolete, you could say. Perhaps specific details you garnered in conversations are worth writing down somewhere.
Oh, yeah, something real specific. But I also just I don't know how, I guess he was saying that he impressed people by knowing these details, and that's how he got early jobs in Hollywood. But I just feel like that's part of the story, and we're not getting the whole of it. So it's kind of hard to say, keep a Rolodex, and you too will be able to, make millions of dollars calling people on the phone or something. Because that's kind of seems like what he does is call people on the phone and get texts. But
yeah, I mean, to be clear, I'm sure a lot of business relationships are just about sort of managing that kind of thing. And a lot of business deals are made based on personal knowledge like that.
Yeah.
And so even if you went in that direction where like the book was more about his work as essentially what it seems to be like a sort of business relationship manager, more than like the nitty-gritty business dealings themselves, that might be worth something.
Yeah, to make this book palatable, I just feel like it really needed to pick a direction.
Yeah.
It needed to choose, like, am I going to be an actual heartfelt memoir here? Am I going to talk about Chinese American business? Am I going to meld these two effectively? Or am I just going to talk about relationship building, perhaps? I mean, he just needed to choose one and not try to do this. That and also having an editor that would have noticed things that were maybe a little too much of an exaggeration or an outright lie or things that would have been insensitive to China. Just a lot.
We've said our piece on this one now, Paris.
Yeah, don't read it. Anyway, thank you, of course, to Lynn for recommending this one. It was a time. Oh,
it was one of the most boring books. It was an absolute slog.
Yeah, it was The Art of the Deal 2020 China edition for sure. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you to the rest of our patrons. Thank you, Dari, Greg, Will, Veronica, Dee, Jared, Lynn, of course, Sinya, Yakub, Bobby Blackcat, Jensina, Mayo Cat, Elliot, Kieran, Martin, Jay, Scott, Luchek, Jay again, CTAP1, and Pancake Ronan. Thank all of you for your generous support of the Terrible Book Club. If you also want to help support the show, you can subscribe on YouTube. You can donate some money to us every month on our Patreon to access videos and some Mystery Science Theater 3000 style commentary on bad TV and movies, outtakes, and other random audiovisual weirdness, including our newest content series, The Lost Pages of Maradonia. If that sounds fun to you, head on over to the Patreon. Ko-fi is another thing we have that is kind of doesn't have any stuff on it, but if you want to just throw us $1 like one time or something, you can use Ko-fi, Ko-fi. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, if you're on those platforms. Most importantly, though, we'd really love if you either reviewed the show somewhere like on Apple Podcasts, or if you shared the show on social media and told at least one person about it. It'd be pretty cool. If you want to contact us directly, you can send us a message on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Goodreads, Patreon, or you can send an email to terriblebookclub@gmail.com.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining us on this round of Terrible Book Club. Next time, we're going to be back in a completely different area.
Oh, next time we're exploring.
We're doubling down.
We're exploring another ology, folks.
It's the first 2-book Terrible Book Club episode.
No, that's not true. Well, yeah, the first 2-book. We have done one that was 2 stories published in 1 volume, but
yes,
they were unrelated.
This is separately
That's
purchased.
True. That's true. We are reading 2 books in a 19-book series about an ology. Those are the only clues I'm giving you. You
won't get it. Don't try to guess.
No. Just get ready, y'all. More ologies.
All right. With that, Paris, I'll see you later.
All right. See you next time. I don't know why, but in my mind, I was like, why isn't the outro music playing? My mind was like, where's the automatic edit of this episode, Chris? Why aren't you in my mind? Why aren't you editing this in real time as we record, Chris?